to our second Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Councillor Hackwell couldn't attend this evening, so I'm substituting for him.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the record of the meeting. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 13th of July as correct? Thank you. Any urgent matters? There's none. Are there any declaration of DPR or any interest or any declarations of whipping? No? Okay, that takes us to agenda item 5, which is the local authority trading companies on pages 19 to 26. Bhupinder Gill, Assistant Director of Legal and Governance, to introduce the report. Bhupinder.
Thank you, Chair. Members of the report in front of you, I'm sure you've all had the chance to consider that in detail. It went to Cabinet in July and the recommendations were approved, and since then I've been working with Cabinet members to start working on the implementation of the recommendations that have been agreed. There is an update towards the end of the report in terms that I have now got, having spoken with the leader, details of who will be sitting on each of the subcommittees, and I have towards the earlier part of this week shared revised draft articles of association and memorandums of understanding that have been drafted by external legal support with those members, and we're hoping to have a round table fairly shortly in order to discuss those and agree which of those areas need to be further refined before requesting each of the LATCOs to formally adopt those articles of association and the memorandum of understanding. With respect to the larger LATCO that we currently have, which is Medway Norse, since writing the report, I've now heard from Medway Norse and their legal advisor in terms of sitting around a table and starting to formalise the current arrangements. That response was only received last night, but I will be moving forward with that in due course. Other than that, I think the report is fairly straightforward and happy to support members in any questions that they may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhupinder. Any member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder what expense we've gone to make all this happen, because I imagine there's some legal costs along the way. And so in most private companies where there's a shareholder, the shareholder's normally represented by non-exec directors. I'm just wondering, in the LATCOs, are there going to be any non-exec directors who attend board meetings on a regular basis to make sure that the shareholders' interests are being protected? And I'm also wondering whether the shareholder boards are likely to slow down decision making, and how you're going to deal with those urgent decisions like, I imagine, borrowing requirements, and how the Cabinet are going to deal with that. Thank you.
Bhupinder.
So the LATCOs currently have, each of them, a number of non-executive directors, and I believe the intention is that that will continue. I suspect most of them will be non-executive directors that are on each of the LATCOs, but this is a matter that is currently under development with the members of the Cabinet, and therefore I can't give you any definitive answers on that. That would be a matter for each of the proposed chairs for each of the shareholder boards to be able to respond to that. In terms of legal expenses, there will be some expense on that in getting external legal advice. I've not received a bill at the moment. I've only had 2 meetings with them. One was a cursory kind of introduction to the subject matter and explaining what it is that the council wanted to do. And since then, I've had a couple of documents sent to me by them. And again, those documents are predominantly template documents that are used for all LATCOs, which require a bit of fine tuning. So, yeah, yes, there will be a bit of expense. but these have not been reviewed ever since the companies were established, and I think it's about time that they were, bearing in mind all the publicity that we will all have seen over the last couple of years, began a number of LATCOs going into failure, so we need to make sure that they are fit for purpose. In terms of any urgent decisions that need to be made by the company, there will be a scheme of delegation that sits under each memorandum of understanding. So the company will have powers to make decisions for most matters. However, I think, and this is a matter that needs to be further discussed yet with Cabinet members and also our Chief Finance Officer, that if there is to be borrowing, additional requirements by the company, there may well be a delegation for a reasonable amount, but if that exceeds a threshold, then I'm sure that you as elected members would want the shareholders to be involved in those discussions. But at the same time, I think in the Cabinet report, if I just scroll through it, there was also a recommendation that was there granted to me in consultation with the relevant chairperson for each shareholder board to take any decisions that are required as a matter of urgency. So hopefully that won't slow down the company or the board.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Has the role of the non-execs been clearly defined? Have they been in place for a number of years, and actually they should be subject to re-election? Because ultimately we are the shareholder, and if I understand this correctly, all the risk, particularly of MDC, is on the council. So if this board operationally gets it wrong, then that's going to be on council taxpayers. So I think there's risk on that. And with all due respect to the other side, I noticed that you make the comment in the report that the Labour group don't feel that they have the skills necessary to be on the board on a more regular basis. Is what support is the Labour group going to be given to make these decisions as they come up? And I just wondered if in the interim the other side had considered maybe speaking to our directors who had been there to help in that, just in the transition. Councillor Brown.
Thank you. Can you answer a bit?
Well, I won't comment on any of the political comments that you've made there. As an officer, that's outside of my remit. Whether members across the chamber wish to engage with one another and share learning experiences that they've had, I would generally support that. I think that's a good thing. And in terms of support for the shareholder boards, they are being set up as subcommittees of the Cabinet, and therefore they will have all of the officer corps there to support them in their decision making.
On the scrutiny of the non-execs?
So in terms of the non-execs, as and when these committees are up and running, there will be, my recommendation clearly will be to have detailed role profiles, job descriptions for the non-exec directors, and I would also be advocating that we go out and seek almost independent recruitment of those to make sure, as I've said in the report, that those that are appointed to steer the company have the relevant skills, knowledge and experience to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Hubbard.
My interface with the one of these three companies was actually more to do with MDC, and I have to say that having been to Overview Scrutiny and scrutinised the relevant portfolio holders who actually were on these companies, I don't think the officialism was something that came over. Also, I have great concern that there was political decisions being taken within MDC that should have been external. For example, is the nonsense of these 106 agreements that which were being knocked around in October last year, when we had the then director of MDC speaking in favour of altering the section 106 for Chatham Waters, that's Peel's Holdings, if you weren't aware, only for us not being aware that within 2 weeks, because that was the next planning meeting, the Calvin Galvin's company were bringing forward changes to Section 106, that would have meant the council reneging on the 106 agreement to pay for various things the council has to undertake for the council to fill in. So this is going to set things on a professional level with professional directors and not what we had, which fell well short. And also, the Medway Development Company just concentrated in Chatham when the prize was in Strood, for instance, opposite the Castle and Cathedral on Strood Riverside. And I have no idea, and we couldn't get an answer to why Medway Development Company felt it was not something that should be going forward for something that was actually quite clear should happen. It was just concentrating on one area. So hopefully political interference will stop happening and we'll get a proper things on a proper footing.
Thank you, Councillor Herbert. Councillor Brown.
My question is actually for Councillor Lawrence. Are you asking for us to have a drains up on the previous administration's running of MDC? Because you seem to be questioning something that hasn't come into place. If you want a factual look at things, do you want to have a look at what happened in the past? And are you willing to pay for it?
Thank you, Councillor
I'm
Brown.
very
Do you want to
happy
respond, Councillor?
Yeah, I simply asked the scrutiny of the decision made at Cabinet, Councillor Brown. I thought it was quite an easy question. I praised.
Thank you. Through the chair, please. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, as you know, I'm a new boy to this committee, and forgive my naivety if I don't have much idea of the background, but looking through this report, to me, there's a danger that with shareholder boards only, the council is going to lose control of these companies and the direction they're going in. And I don't understand how the directors will be set from shareholders board without members actually being on the board of directors. And secondly, the other thing which comes to mind, this comes on the back of an email sent by the acting chair of the Children and Young People's Committee requesting that an ONS meeting be postponed 2 hours before the actual due starting date because they didn't have time to scrutinise the work, which shows a lack of competence.
Sorry, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Brown, if you need to speak, will you come through the chair, please? Thank you.
But that's not for this committee. The decision is
Ca-
that is not for this committee. Point of order.
If I may continue, the fact is, I just said, on the back of this shows a certain lack of competence in that committee. And I understand it doesn't have anything to do with this committee, but we now have in black and white that the current cabinet don't have the competence to run these or sit on the board of these new companies. So if that is the case, how can they be expected to run the council, which is in effect a much larger company? That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you.
Just a point of order, Chair.
Councillor MacDonald, go.
You know, the comments are, it's okay us going across the floor and having a bit of a dig at each other. However, Councillor Kemp, the incident that happened that you're referring to, number one, isn't really related to this item. Secondly, there was real reasons for that, and that was to do with the outage on the computer system. So I think it's, Chair, let's stick to the topic and about the confidence. And as Councillor Brown said, if we wanted to really look back on some of the directors and some of the chairs in previous committees, some that are no longer here but were investigated, I don't think we want to bring that up in this meeting either.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald.
Just to respond, I'm just highlighting a certain perception of a lack of competence all round with the new administration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Any member? Just one from me, Bupinda, before we move to come to the Vice Chair. How would the establishment of the shareholder board ensure proper oversight and appropriate shareholder input into the decision-making process of this LACO?
Thank you, Chair. So it'll operate in a number of ways. Firstly, there will be a memorandum of understanding, so it will set out the expectations of what the shareholder board and the shareholder, the council, expects the company to do and to deliver on. And as a result of that, there will then be regular meetings where either officers and or directors from the company come back and report to the shareholder boards on the performance of the company and the delivery against objectives. In addition to that, we would be expecting that the company produces a business plan each year, setting out what it sets to achieve and do, and then provide regular detailed reporting to the shareholder boards, both against milestones, key performance indicators, but also financial information as well. And as and when the shareholder may have new projects or initiatives that he wants the companies to undertake, to request a formal a report on what the company intends to do about that and whether the company recommends that that is an action that is pursued. So rather than being involved in the day-to-day operational matters, the proposal is by adopting such a process, the council is able to set the medium-term and long-term objectives for the company and then holds those with the relevant experience, skills, and knowledge to drive those companies forward to deliver against that longer-term agenda.
Just a follow-up from that, my members alluded to risk previously. How will the council manage risk associated with the changes in this governance structure?
As with all things, Chair, there is always an element of risk. Similar to the reporting on the business plan that is to be developed, one would expect that there is an analysis of risks that the company is facing, but also detailed risks into relation to each of the projects that it's doing, and those are then shared and considered by the shareholder board. In terms of any risks associated with the changes in relation to governance, when the proposals are presented to the relevant subcommittees, shareholder boards, then as you know, the templates that we have for reports here include a section on risks, and they'll be detailed within there, and that will be a matter for members to determine if those risks are acceptable or not.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Chair, thank you. I'm not happy with the decision that's been made. I think there's too much space between the operational board, the shareholder board, and key decisions that are going to need to be taken. I think there is a real danger that the operational board are going to take decisions that are going to fall on the council taxpayers. Now, whether the previous board was perfect or not, clearly the other side don't agree, but I think there is a real danger that decisions might be taken by the MDC board that fall on the council to underwrite the liability of that decision. I'd much rather that whether it be a cabinet member or an officer, was the non-exec on the board, so attended every board meeting and actually made sure that the shareholder agreement, where all these limits and what you can do and what you can't do are enforced at that board meeting, rather than waiting for a decision to come back to a cabinet board or a with this.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. That is actually the proposal. One of the proposals is that there is an officer nominated, to be agreed at the moment, who will receive all papers that are going to be considered by the board, reviews them against what the council policy is and the direction of travel for the council, and where those decisions may result in decisions that are contrary to what the council seeks to achieve, then there will be a power to, firstly, discuss the matters with the shareholder board, the subcommittee, and get a steer from them so that can be reported through to the board, and dependent upon the seriousness or the implications of any decision to be taken by the board to be able to defer those until the relevant shareholder board has met and provided its steer. So there will be that level of oversight and hopefully that level of oversight that Councillor Lawrence has just mentioned.
Thank you. Any member? Okay, Vice Chair, we have a recommendation on page 19.
The committee is asked to take note of the Cabinet's decision as set out in paragraph 2.2 of the report. 1.2, the committee is asked to note progress in the establishment of the 3 shareholder boards.
Is that seconded? Agreed? Sorry. Let's go to the vote. Who's in favour? Who's against? Agenda item 6 is the Council Plan Performance Monitoring Report and Strategic Risk Summary for Q1 2023 to 2024. Before Sam Beckfile, our Chief Organisation and Culture Officer, introduced the report, Phil Watts, our Chief Operational Officer, would like to say a few words. Phil.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I hand over to Sam, I just wanted to make a few comments about the next 3 reports that you've got in front of you. They're all the 3 quarterly monitoring reports in respect of performance, capital monitoring and the revenue budget monitoring. You will notice that they are slightly different in terms of format from those that this committee will have seen in previous years. They're much shorter and they're focused on the activity, the risks and the budgets pertinent to the remit of this particular committee. This is in response to an issue that's kind of become more and more apparent over recent years, that the level of scrutiny and the debate has veered into areas that are not within the remit of this committee. And the unfortunate consequence of that is that officers in the room have been unable to provide the kind of level of response and support that the committee deserves. So what we've done is this year, finance will follow the pattern of performance. There will be financial monitoring and performance monitoring going to all of the committees, focused on the remits of those particular committees, and I would sort of beg your indulgence that you restrict your lines of inquiry to the areas that fall within the remit of this committee. That's all I really wanted to say by way of an introduction, and then I'll hand over to Sam to introduce this performance report.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Chair. So the full report went to Cabinet earlier this month. This report summarises Q1 performance for the climate change programme, which falls under the remit of this committee. The report also presents the Q1 review of the strategic risks. There's been one change to the strategic risk score, which is the SR47 climate change, and this has changed from an A2 to a C3. One risk is proposed to be removed from the strategic risk summary, and that is the SR02 business continuity and emergency planning. And this is due to a positive audit around the emergency planning and the ongoing process around business continuity that is managed with.
Thank you, Sam. Any member? Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. There's no colour coding. Have I missed something? there's the you know, you've got the nice key at the start of the report, and then I'm looking at Q1 summary of strategic risk performance. Yeah, I'm not sure, and you know, forgive me if it's a stupid question, but it's the first time I've seen this because I wasn't at the first ONS. But am I expecting to see green, amber, and red on that report? Thank you.
Thank you. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, typically we do use the grid that has green, amber and red. Why it's not there, I don't know. I will take that away and have a look, but typically, yes, it's normally in colour. I don't know if on ModGov it does do colour. I'm not familiar with it that much.
Sorry, Terry, do you want to come in?
it's not a mod.gov issue. It's probably where we used to have all the measures. So some measures will have a rating and some won't. I'm not sure whether this one isn't, you know, if because of the quarter it's not got a rating. I'm not sure. It might just be that the tables, the code, that's been left there. But because you're only left with that one measure, maybe it wasn't needed. I'm not sure. Really good point there, and we'll have a look at it.
It shows I read the report, though, doesn't it?
Sam?
Yeah, so we do use it for the performance report, that's the three colours, and there isn't a performance measure for climate change, which has been brought up previously, and we are looking at that for next year in terms of the Fundamental Council Plan refresh. But within the risk register, we also use colour coding, so that's the part we take away, the risk register. But for the performance part, the climate change doesn't have a performance measure.
Yeah, I mean, obviously climate change is not maybe the crisis that we like it to be. Just page 33, there's no colour coding on that page at all, so yeah, so you'll take that away. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. On the climate change, you can go back and look down at page 33. The inherent risk score was A2, so very likely a major impact. For some, this current risk score for quarter 1, 23-24 has changed to unlikely and moderate, but crossed out underneath the very likely major. With it moving by 0.54, and we've also seen the congestion, which causes a lot of the pollution, is probably getting worse, not better, across Medway due to mainly a lot of roadworks everywhere. Can you explain why that score's been changed? Thank you.
Sam?
Thank you, Chair. Unfortunately, somebody from the climate change team couldn't be here this evening. They are a member of this committee, but we did have a quick call with them prior to this. I'm near the speaker, it keeps dropping out. What we've been told is the climate change action plan has undergone an internal audit, and it's provided assurance that an effective action plan and associated governance is in place and everything's okay to move forward. The formal audit opinion of the risk management is turned green, and therefore a recommendation has been to establish better mechanisms around the government, which the team are currently doing and will be updated on the next quarter. And unfortunately, that's the only update I can get for you at this time.
Councillor Lawrence.
Sorry, I just have one more question. I noticed the cyber security rating is CI. There's so much chatter about the amount of cyber crime, attempted hacks. I'm really surprised that's not a higher risk to the council. Especially, I think the council also hosts its own servers, so I would have thought that was a major risk to the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to respond, Paul or Keith?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the inherent risk without doing any controls is the highest it can be, A1, within the report. The C1 represents the mitigations that we've put in place to manage that risk, which is why we define it as a managed risk. So it'll always be on the strategic risk register, and as technology improves, we improve with it. But the C1 represents the controlled risks with the mitigations we put in place, which increase as the threat goes up as well. Okay. So it's an ongoing managed risk. Yeah.
Thank you. Any member? Okay, before we come to you, Vice Chair, one from me as well. Probably you can answer, Paul. How does the risk management process help the council identify priorities and objectives and increase the probability of success while reducing the likelihood of failure?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So we're constantly monitoring the external environment. We're looking at what happens at other organisations, and we constantly implement new tools and techniques. So there's been some data breaches recently in other organisations. So in December 2022, we introduced sensitivity labels for all of our data, so emails and files. So that allows us to categorise that data. Sensitive data can't be shared for intended recipients only. And then one of the data breaches that came up recently was a freedom of information request. included some sensitive data. So we've got a new Freedom of Information request process which manages cases and has those controls in place, so things are approved before they're submitted to the public. So we monitor what's going on in the environment and tailor our responses accordingly.
Just following up from that, how do we manage that process when dealing with other government agency?
Yep. So if I ask Keith Baker to respond with that partnership working.
Thanks. Yeah. Obviously, we do engage with the National Cybersecurity Centre. We are also part of some of the CTAG groups within the Southeast region, which we try and use those platforms to share sort of highly confidential information about some of the statuses of other organisations and ourselves.
Sorry, I was probing into GDPR. How do we ensure we're not exposed to a breach in terms of GDPR?
So we obviously are there are multiple avenues around data breaches. We do have technical measures in place that monitor the flow of those traffics and the type of data that moves. However, there are elements around user journeys where there are risks of user elements and users sending out, and that's where there's a close relationship that we work with our information governance team to try and build up those mitigations. An example of this is we were seeing a lot of user issues around GDPR. We then introduced, as Paul alluded to, the sensitivity labels. That was a mechanism to try and mitigate some of those risks and problems that had featured at that time. I hope that helps with some of the answer.
Thank you. Vice Chair.
Members are asked to consider the Q1 2023-24 performance of the programme that falls under the remit of this committee, Appendix 1, and the strategic risk that falls under the remit of this committee, Appendix 2.
Is that seconded? Is that agreed? Agreed. All right, that brings us on to agenda item 7, the capital budget monitoring for 2023-2024 round 1. Andy McNally Johnson, head of corporate account, to introduce the report. Phil Watts, our chief operational officer, will also be able to add some input and take questions. Andy.
Thank you, Chair. So this report details the results of the first round of capital monitoring relating to the schemes within the remit of this committee. It was presented to Cabinet on the 8th of August and has been considered by Directorate Management teams and based on returns submitted by budget managers. Section 5 on page 46 and 47 contains information for all directorates for context. Table 1 in section 5.1 details the financial summary for the capital programme, and table 2 on the following page details the associated funding streams associated with that budget. The result of the first round of monitoring is projected underspend of 149.7 million across the council, but none of that relates to schemes within the remit of this committee. Section 6 and 7, 47 and 48 respectively, give further details as to the progress of each scheme within business support and digital service area and related members' priorities, as well as a summary of funding streams and overall budgetary forecast. Risks related to the capital programme for which this committee is responsible are included on section 9 on page 49, and I'm happy to take any questions that members may have relating to this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member? Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is quite good news, actually, isn't it? The projected spend on capital investment is £150 million less than budget, which includes splashes. So overall, a lot less is going to be spent on capital investment. Or alternatively, this could mean a lot of less investment in Medway much needed capital projects. The other good news, which I picked up from from table 2, is that only 40% of the investment comes from borrowing and the rest comes from grants and income, etc. On the negative note, I regret the passing of the Members' Priorities Fund. This has proved to be a very convenient safety net for members to improve conditions and things in their own ward. Its passing should be lamented.
Sorry, can we have one meeting, please? Thank you.
Yeah, yes, it's not something which was utilised extensively, but when it was normally for things which are considerably more than a ward improvement fund, and it was a way that members could in fact improve their ward extensively. And I say its passing, it should be lamented. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor Hubbard.
Okay, on the same little bit, members' priorities. I spoke about it at the Regen ONS. And let's get it right. It was actually the former leader's slush fund. It was funding that he gave, that solely went through him for years, even when he was the deputy leader. It was prioritised for those in his own group, in wards in his own group, people he'd liked as well. Very few members of the Labour group ever got the chance to even put in a bid. And when I did put in a bid, I happened to be, because I had 2 other Conservative councillors there, the leader of the council, well, he was deputy leader at the time, made a decision within half an hour of something that was in the back of a fag packet. There was no spreadsheet, no cost analysis. It was simply a slush fund which he felt was good to hand out to who he favoured. And it wasn't favoured to those in other wards. Now that fund has gone, we can get a proper budget heading and properly spent across the borough rather than just favoured by one individual.
Thank you, Councillor Hubbard. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I've just, reading the report, was very interested in the amount of money we're spending on ICT infrastructure. I've worked in big companies and small companies. You know, I know government departments who actually owns and builds their own data centres anymore. Most of this stuff is bought in as a service in properly set up data centres with proper disaster recovery. I was really surprised to see that we're spending £3.6 million, and no doubt that's money we're going to have to spend reasonably regularly because you have to keep upgrading. One of the things about ICT security is the quality of the machine you have and your ability to run proper disaster recovery. Now, I know this is now got digital in its committee. I'd really like to understand why it is and how old that decision is for us to build and run our own data centre effectively, and is there a better way of doing it so that we don't have to keep dipping into borrowing to keep upgrading the infrastructure? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Phil?
Yeah, thank you. It's unfortunate that our head of ICT has just walked out of the room, actually. I wish I was expecting that question. We have looked at the options between hosting our own IT on site through the data centre. I mean, I think I resent, I suppose, the assertion that our data centre isn't managed in a professional it's been running for a long time. We've had that data centre for a long time, and indeed we sell that service to other people. Over the years, we've looked at the mix between going completely on cloud, and I think we've adopted an approach where it's a bit hybrid. So some of our proprietary systems are hosted on cloud, some of our activities hosted within our own data centre, and we've concluded that is the most cost-effective mix and the right way to manage our IT at the moment. But if you want a more detailed response than that, my head of ICT would probably be able to give it to you.
Would you like to come back? Yeah. Come back, Councillor Lawrence.
Can I just correct you? I wasn't criticising the service. I was raising a question about the approach to providing that service. I think it'd be interesting to have a report, if it's timely and it fits in with the work plan of the committee, to see that the cost analysis of continuously having to upgrade your facilities. If we're selling this as a service, how much are we making from that service? And what is the inherent risks of running that? Because I think going back to what this committee is about scrutinising the way we do things. And as a new councillor, I'd like that opportunity to revisit that particular area. It's something that I'm very interested in. I work for a financial services company, and we have to spend a lot of money making sure that our systems are up and running. So that's the point of my question, Phil. It wasn't about criticising the service at all.
Would you like to come back, Phil?
Well, only as much as, if you be clear what it is you want from us. Is it a report, a briefing?
I'll send you.
Okay, all right, and I'm happy to respond on it.
Thank you. Do we have any other member? Now, Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Phil, just looking on bottom of page 47 and top of page 48, the ICT infrastructure works. You're looking to procure new backup solution, budgeting about 330,000 for that. Looking to start in August 2023, and then a data centre refurbishment, which you use in a remaining budget 137,000, completed in stages. Have we noticed over the last few years, costs, especially in the sector, for the public sector, seem to have spiralled? You're anticipating the scheme to be completed within the approved budget. With all them figures, have we mitigated for potential additional costs on there, and that's why we've got the extra budget, or this is the total budget we're spending, but they're potentially, with how it's all been going since COVID, there seems to be a premium on everything, especially labour, with specialist works, which I'm pretty sure that this will fall under.
Would you like to respond, Phil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, it's a good question, and you could equally have applied that question to every scheme within our capital programme. We've experienced inflationary pressures, not just in terms of ICT, but bricks and mortar, the availability of materials and labour there. I can only take what I'm being told by the managers responsible for those projects, that they have they still believe that those schemes will be delivered on budget and on time, if that's what the monitoring says. But it's a question. I can go and talk to Keith and Paul and make sure they're comfortable that they can deliver the scheme that was originally agreed within the cash envelope that we've allocated to it.
Thank you, Chair. My thing is that with the thing is that, yeah, if it comes in budget, but at the moment where we're looking at saving every penny, if the contingency is there, if we don't spend it, then obviously that will then come back into the scheme, which will be even better for the council. But I do understand with the inflationary pressures that we've got to plan for the worst, but hope for the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other member? Vice Chair.
The committee is asked to note the results of the first round of the capital monitoring for 2023-24.
There was a recommendation with regards to a report analysis on the inherent risk on the data centre, I believe.
Chair, I think what I'd rather do is write to Phil, if that's okay with you, and ask him for just answer some questions.
So, Councillor MacDonald.
Just to be a bit helpful, I think it'd be really good for us all to get that, to get that, because we spoke about the items. I'd be quite interested in. Obviously, if Councillor Lawrence gives it away from the meeting, the question, it'd be good for us to all have the answer to that briefing, if it's all right, Chair.
Yes, we'd like to come back?
Yeah, so basically, Councillor Lawrence will give me a brief, and then I'll draft a briefing note for circulation to the whole committee. That's fine. Yeah.
The The committee is asked to note the results of the first round of the capital budget monitoring for 2023-24 and also a briefing note around IT.
Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Is that agreed? Great, thank you. That takes us to agenda item 8, which is the revenue budget monitoring. David Reynolds, Head of Revenue Accounts, to introduce the report. And Phil Watts is present to assist with any response. Over to you, David.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this report was presented to Cabinet on the 8th of August and summarises the revenue budget monitoring position that had been considered by Directorate Management teams based on returns submitted by budget managers for the first round of monitoring for 23-24. The result of that process is a projected overspend of 17.3 million across the Council, of which 2.4 million relates to the business support and digital and centralised services area within the remit of this committee. As reported to Cabinet in June, the capital and revenue budget outturn for 23-24, the Council's general reserves currently stand at £10.084 million, so the Council would not therefore be in a position to fund an overspend on the scale that is currently projected. Cabinet agreed the recommendation to CMT to implement urgent action to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full Council, or as a minimum to within what can be funded from general reserves, including consideration of the following actions: a cessation of all non-essential spend, including reviewing spend on non-statutory services, curtailing, reducing, refinancing the capital programme where it impacts the revenue budget, and reviewing and rationalising land and building assets. As Phil said previously, the only areas within the remit of the committee are now presented here. That is all detailed in section 9, which starts on page 59. Finally, a quick correction. In the summary, it does refer to the current Council's summary position being at section 5. It should say section 4, so apologies for that. But happy to take any further questions. Oh, sorry, one further thing to say is currently, as the report stands, all the sections that are not relevant to this committee have been greyed out. In future, they will be deleted from the report, so they won't be present in the report. It's just a bit of a timing issue of getting reports ready for these committees following the decisions that were made. So, again, apologies for that.
Thank you, David. Do we have any member? Councillor Pembroke.
Thank you. I think, thanks for the report, Dave. That's it's hard to deliver, the big negative. But I just want to say, I think we can all recognise that we're in an extremely difficult situation with the current budget, as with the previous one, with the last administration where we had to use the reserves to settle the financial year, and combined with a reduction in support from central government of 91% since 2010, not helped by previous members using their dual role as a Gillingham and Rainham MP to vote to reduce the grant to Medway, not once, but on 3 occasions, in 2017 by 44%, in 2018 by 28%, and 2019 by 56%. And my question is...
Point of order, Chair.
Councillor Prenter, we've got point of order.
Point of order. Sorry, I thought these committees were supposed to be non-political, and you're reading from a prepared statement.
From my notes. They're
so,
my notes.
Chair, we're supposed to be scrutinising the budget outturn.
Sorry, what's your point of order, Councillor Lawrence?
I understood these committees are about scrutinising decisions made in the not what Councillor Prenter is engaged in.
She's going into a question now.
Members.
Thank you.
Just to clarify to Councillor Lawrence, I've not mentioned a political party. You've politicised it by saying that. I'm appreciating how difficult it is for the officers to go through and try and save constantly because of the overspend. So they're doing a lot of hard work trying to reduce the spend. So my question was, have we exhausted all opportunities for additional funding that we might possibly have from all sources? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prenton. Phil, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, in terms of the way our budget is funded, it comes from a range of sources. You've referenced some of them, so council tax, business rates, government grant, and obviously any income that the council can generate itself from fees and charges. So I don't think we've exhausted the opportunities. Obviously, fees and charges can be increased, but obviously we're also in a cost of living crisis at the moment, so there's balancing a number of tensions in making those sort of decisions. In terms of council tax, the tax base is what it is. So if we've got houses and they're assessed at a particular band, we can only levy council tax based on that tax base. Business rates, again, is what it is. And government grant, we've been given very little steer as to what additional grants we might get in year. But I think recent experience has taught us that we do tend to get additional finance coming in year. We've got a one-year settlement that's announced when we set the budget, but often in response to particular pressures nationally, we'll get additional grant. But I think the fees and charges is the only lever that we've got in year to increase our income generation, really.
Thank you, and I appreciate the fees and charges are going to be really difficult in the current climate. It was about funding from central government. Were there any other opportunities? And as you say, during the year, if become available, we've got the resources to be able to make those applications and basically get as much as we can in for Medway.
The funding opportunities that arise in year tend to be capital bidding processes. We have found that sometimes things like the Housing Support Fund and some of the grants that were coming in COVID were announced in year. But as a general rule, we don't tend to get revenue grant announced in year. He's going to tell me.
Councillor. Councillor. Oh, sorry. Dave? Yeah, you want to?
Just to follow up, I mean, and it's slightly outside of the remit of this committee, but in terms of additional government grants since this report was written, we've had one announcement around additional funding for adult social care, around work for market sustainability funding. We haven't seen the detail of what that grant is, so it depends very much on what the conditions of that grant say to how we can actually use it. So obviously it's something we'll factor in the round two's budget monitoring. Yeah.
Councillor Croser.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, apologies for being late. I was party to the decision to start at 6 o'clock, but inadvertently forgot to come. For my naive benefit, could somebody explain to me the difference between overspend and pressure?
Phil.
What's in a name, basically? I think they're interchangeable.
They are one and the same thing, is it?
Well, I think we use the term pressure because it's a pressure that hasn't necessarily manifested, and hope by the end of the year that we can make it go away. No, there isn't a particular distinction between the term overspend and pressure.
I guess it begs the question of why do we use two different terminologies, and is there a nuance there? There must be a nuance there.
Just to make the report more interesting, I suppose. No, I
Thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the comment about the reports, actually, and say something positive. You're laughing because you're surprised I'm going to say that. But just going back, just first of all, Councillor Lawrence, I think we all make a little bit of a statement at the beginning. I think all of us are agreed we would like some more money from government. No matter what colour the government, we would all like some more money, and we've all agreed that every ONS. So I think that's what Councillor Prenter was trying to make, and she made it really, the point really well. I just wanted to say the reports are really good at ONS, Chair. They are really helpful. You know, we're not just getting the end of the year a little snapshot. We are getting exactly where the council are per quarter, and I think that's that transparency. And I'm going to say it's a good transparency, a good decision made by the cabinet and by officers. And I know I appreciate on my ONS, and whether that's allowed or not, I'm going to say it is really appreciated, and more of it, please, so we get to see the real picture.
Thank you. Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown, you've been waiting. Yeah.
I think Councillor Joy might have just got his hand up before me.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody, for the report. And I second what Councillor MacDonald said about the detail going to the other committees. My question is sort of technical. It's about, you talked about fees and charges, but we have been a little bit hamstrung about the parking charges for the years with the dispensation around parking on a Monday. So I wonder where we should see the pressure that that's causing on our parking income, because that's going to take a serious amount. I mean, the targets were always challenging, but having taken a whole day out of it, I think it's going to be a little bit more. And I'm wondering where that's best to come back to, because I really do think that officers need to know that we appreciate that pressure that they're under to try and deliver that.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Phil.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So when that decision was announced at the budget meeting, it was on the back of the leader at the time announcing a number of measures that he wanted to implement to make savings, and from those savings he was going to fund the free Monday. So that was reflected in the budget build. Now, if the point you're making is that's a pressure that we've funded in the budget but that we can afford, then it's within the council's gift to make a decision to change that.
Yeah, my question was more about us understanding the effect that that's going to have on the income budget and where that should be reported back to, rather than us make it, you know, a decision without actually the detail of the effect.
It was reflected in the budget build.
Yeah,
so,
but
so
on the
we
ground,
reduced the income budget
yes,
accordingly when that decision was announced.
Yeah, okay.
Am I not getting the question?
I'll accept the answer. Phil, I wanted to know what it was going to affect, how, where we were going to do some analysis on that. It's all right in the budget bill to make some predictions, and what I wanted to see how it affected the income on a month-to-month basis, and we can't report that in Q1. But my question was, where is it best reported to? Either just into Regen and audit, or is it to come here as well?
Sorry, I do understand now. So the impact, the actual impact of that decision will be reflected in the monitoring, and as you say, we probably haven't seen the impact fully at Q1, so may not have been reflected in the Q1 figures. It will eventually manifest in the Q2 and Q3 figures, but you probably won't see it in the detail there. So if this committee, sorry, not if this committee, if the RCE committee, when it scrutinises the monitoring, wants to ask for more detail, it's within its gift to do that.
Thank you.
All right, sorry, I made hard work of that.
Thank you. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. My questions relate to top of page 60, corporate management, forecast overspend of 610,000. You've got a couple of things in there saying with regards to business support, 484,000, of which 200,000 relates to an expected corporate property rationalisation review. Just wondering if we can get a bit more detail. And then the next one, pressures of 81,000 on treasury expenses in relation to budgeted miscellaneous receipt income. Just would like to know what budgeted miscellaneous receipt income relating to £60,000 is about, please.
Phil, would you like to respond?
Sorry, I will. So the first one was...
Phil, Andy, David.
Yeah, so the £200,000 that you referred to was one of those announcements in the council kind of budget speech around closing the gap that was announced by the previous leader. The reason we're showing it as kind of a pressure is that work is kind of currently ongoing. We don't know what the outcome of that is, so to be prudent, we've shown that as a kind of pressure in round one. As we get more information and more clarity around that and that work progresses through the year, that forecast will be adjusted in relation to that. And then the next bit is two separate figures. So there's a figure of £81,000 on Treasury expenses, which is largely in relation to kind of, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, but I think it probably is in relation to kind of increased interest rates that we are now paying on some of our kind of borrowing that we can't charge to kind of the interest and financing programme. And then the budgeted miscellaneous receipts is a kind of it's one of those historic kind of income targets that we've had in the past where we've tended to have some unidentified income that we could kind of badge against that particular banner. And again, at the moment, we are unsure whether there will be any of that income available. So we have forecast it has been unachieved so far, but we will review it as we go through the year, if that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few questions on the detail. So the overspend in the finance team of £867,000, it seems to be the reason for this is down to the way housing benefit subsidy is calculated. What are we doing to sort of cut our cloth based on what we're getting? How are we reconfiguring the service to look for savings? How is digital transformation helping us in that area? You know, I know there's a lot of buzz around AI, for example, and text chatbots that can take people through these processes. Anyone dealt with a finance company recently will know that you hardly ever speak to a person these days. The organisational culture forecast is overspent by 228,000, and there's some comment about loss of income. What is it we're selling? And if we can't make it work, can we stop doing it? The other thing was another comment about ICT spend. There's overspend on ICT, which I suppose goes back to the question about whether we should be running our own data centres. I've got an issue on legal services. There's a massive overspend on legal services. And I think this goes back to my thoughts around, I thought the leader of the council told us we'd dealt with all the locums and we got rid of them all and we'd saved the council thousands of pounds from his last leadership report at the full council. Well, that's clearly not the case. I'm wondering whether we've been entrepreneurial in looking at our legal team. If we can't recruit them here, then why don't we go create a legal team where there are more people to buy? Because I think we're competing against London here, right? So why legal services doesn't need to be in Medway. It could be in some other place where we can actually recruit and actually do the job properly. I'm wondering about, with all the working from home, how we're managing productivity. Are we getting the right bang for the salary buck, given the MedPay award and everything else? So how are we managing all of that? And finally, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Just before we respond, member, I'm hearing a lot of mumbling in the background, making it difficult to hear the question. So can we just be a little bit careful on how we mumbles, please? Phil.
Thank you, Chair. So there were a few questions there, and I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to help me with those. So the first one you asked about benefit subsidy, I'm going to invite Gemma in due course to respond to that one. There was a question around HR income. There was one around legal services and locums and the whole work from home. There were three questions there. I'm going to invite Sam to comment on those ones. And the ICT overspend, I mean, it's basically contracts. They increase. Now you could challenge the the strategy that we've got of the in-house data centre, but cloud-hosted services are going up in cost as well. So,
Yeah, I mean, I've just entered into a 3-year contract on a cloud hosting, so I'm not looking at any contract increases.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I'm going to hand over to Gemma first then, if I may, Chair, and then...
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the loss around in-housing benefit isn't related to the admin. So admin we're coming within our budget. It's related to the actual payments that we have to make under the law to our customers. Under universal credit, we only now deal with housing benefit for temporary accommodation, which is homeless accommodation given by Medway Council, specified accommodation and pensioners. Sorry, excuse me. We still have some legacy cases, and a lot of those we get 100%. But for example, temporary accommodation claims, we only get 90% of the relevant local housing allowance rate from 2011 back in subsidy. That's how out of date the subsidy orders are. So we get not much back. In terms of specified accommodation, that's supported accommodation. With some, if they're a registered provider, we'll get 100%. But if the provider is a non-registered provider, we will only get 100% up to the local housing, up to what the rent officer says we can get. So that's roughly around £100 to £120. After that, depending on the customer, we're restricted to, we could either lose 100% or we could lose 40%. So, and the actual overall loss on specified accommodation at the moment is 1.8 million in Medway. And what we're doing to try and mitigate that is last year we submitted a application to DLUC to become a supported housing improvement programme area, which we were really lucky and we were successful in achieving funding. So we've got £600,000 to work on improving accommodation in Medway. And it addresses 3 points. It addresses, it's a bit outside of this committee, but it addresses property standards, it addresses the support, but it also addresses value for money. So it's going to enable us to look at that £1.8 million subsidy loss that we have. So we are actively working on it. It's across Medway that we're doing it. So it's within my service, it's within Mark Brethwick's housing service, it's within adult social care. We're really throwing the banner out across. We're making it a functional team. So those are the things that we're doing. But yeah, just to confirm, it's not actually in terms of admin, it's payments and just the way that, and that applies to all councils. All councils are in that position. We're all under the National Housing Benefits Scheme. But I think it's just becoming more apparent now because where the, working age cases are going over to universal credit, we are losing those ones that are 100%. So the ones where we've got the gap are becoming more apparent, and that's that issue.
Thank you. Sam, would you like to come in?
Thank you, Chair. If I take the HR income first around the lack of generation around income, we deliver services to schools and third parties, and that's either through HR or payroll, depending on what they want to opt in to buy from us. Over a number of years now, a lot of schools, when they move to academies, choose to go in-house. They have bigger outfits and better services that they can provide, and we've lost a number of schools as a result of that. So it's not necessarily we haven't been able to retain them. They've got a better offer, which we absolutely understand. The package that's available to schools hasn't increased over a number of years. This year we have had to increase it, and schools purchase in September. So at the moment we don't know how many will buy back. So we've kind of taken our worst position in terms of what the income is that we forecasted we would get, assuming many wouldn't be buying back this year. We know that we've lost 3. We're waiting to see the outcome of the others. It's not just schools that we deliver services to. We do other third parties. So for example, Kindy, we had a temporary recruitment team with Kindy as well as payroll services. We brought the temporary recruitment team in-house to create greater flexibility against the workforce that we needed and the costs that were being associated with it. That means now that service is very small around payroll, and we do need to withdraw because it's not worth delivering anymore. So a piece of work is underway around all of those income generations, but unfortunately once that's in the budget as a forecast, that's going to show as a pressure, and we will absorb what we can within other revenues at the moment. If I may move on then to legal in particular, legal's got a considerable cost there, largely down to the use of locums, where we haven't been able to attract and retain. We're in the middle of a Medpay review, and as part of that, we've restructured the legal services. So they're in the middle of a restructure at the moment. The Medpay review is looking at us being more competitive within the market. We was under a local scheme for a number of years that didn't get reviewed, and therefore we were out of the market in terms of what we was offering. And that didn't just impact legal, but most definitely for the cost of hiring lawyers, there was a significant amount there. The restructure and introduction of career pathways and the ability to offer higher salaries puts us in a much stronger position. So we are looking to reduce the spend. There is a paper that previously went forward to Cabinet to increase the capacity within the legal team, and that's largely down to some of the children's activity that's coming through. And where that will finally be, it will determine when we go to market and what that looks like. But that's under constant review, and I do believe the Medpay review and the restructure that's happened will reduce this particular pressure.
Thank you, Sam. We'd like to come back in.
Thank you for the answers on housing benefit and that part of it. You've done some market testing on salaries, clearly, obviously, because that. So where are we in that market testing with what we're offering compared to what someone could get working in a London borough, for example? Just as a first question, if that's okay.
We are adrift, but we will always be adrift from inner London. So we can't afford to chase inner London. There is a reason why it's inner London.
But we're competing against inner London, aren't we?
Yeah, so we've introduced two new policies. One is a skills shortage allowance. So what that allows us to do to make sure that we don't find ourselves in equal pay claims is put an allowance onto a particular area if we find our surrounding area we have a skill shortage. So we've made sure that there's provisions within the review that we've done that will enable us to respond to market if we find locally we can't get it and our competition is London. We've got to be careful that we don't just increase salaries because of equal pay. So we keep our banding the same, but this particular flexibility around skill shortages allows us to match where we need to because we can't recruit locally. And that's at our disposal now to use.
Just coming back on that and reflecting a little bit from the last ONS where you delivered the staff survey, how much of people leaving the authority, you know, within 18 months of joining is a concern, is a red flag. So we get them on board, they don't like the culture, they don't like working from home, they don't like the office accommodation, whatever it is, is that having an impact on recruitment and retention?
So you'll recall from the staff survey that a number of people predicted they would leave within an 18-month period. We do have high turnover. We do exit interviews. Pay is up there as an issue, but largely one of the biggest issues is career development. And one of the things we haven't had in Medway is career pathways. So people have been held within their salary based on just the cost of living. So under the current scheme, not the new scheme, the current one that we're still commissioned to, when somebody is within their job role, the only way of moving within that job role is through a cost of living increase and a performance award at the end of the year. And where that's been quite small over times, that has certainly meant people felt that they've been held back and not been able to move. So it's not necessarily just about promotion, it's about career development within the current role you're doing. So to combat that now, that's why we put in the career progressional framework, which means there's 3 career points within the current role you're doing, which is entry point, doing very good and doing amazingly, and that will give you significant lift throughout your salary band. So that will go some way to addressing some of the issues that have been coming up through the exit surveys, as well as the market testing, whereby we are absolutely having to change salaries where it's necessary against the medium quartile.
Just one final comeback, Chair. What percentage of the staff are not full-time, Medway employees? Because definitely from the leader's report, he said we'd got rid of all the locums and the contractors, but I'm just wondering exactly what percentage of those staff are not Medway employees.
So from the last count we've done around locums, so this is not services being brought in, this is individual posts as locums, we were just over 200. Now, some of that is largely down to project teams coming in across children's as well, so we've had to do a significant increase in social workers across children's. I can do a report of kind of where the locums sit, what that looks like, and the overall figure against the overall allocation. Yeah, and the cost, yeah. And we have got an ongoing piece of work against the locums, which was commissioned from this committee. It is due back at a certain point that does deliver that exactly where we are, what the exit strategies look like, and how we're going to reduce that reliance on locums. So I'd have to check the work programme to know exactly when it's due back.
Thank you for your answer and questions. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's just going back to Councillor Brown's point, which she made a few minutes ago, regarding the loss of income from the parking in the 10 car parks throughout Medway. This was done on the back of trying to give tangible support to the shopkeepers and traders in our high streets, and the loss of income was accounted for in the budget that was set by the previous administration. I certainly hope that Councillor Brown is not advocating removing that support from our high street traders, because that also would be lamented. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
My question was never about removing it. My question was for us to analyse the result of that decision. And I'm not. And I've been one of the people under the previous administration and this administration to fight very hard for the shopkeepers and the local traders. And you might remember that I was the one who got the return to the high street funding increased from just the main high streets to the smaller places. So I'm very aware of the pressure for businesses and for people with their cost of living. I was never suggesting to get rid of it. I wanted it analysed.
Through you, Chair, that wasn't an implied criticism of Councillor Brown. It's just for a point of clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Councillor MacDonald.
I'm going to keep it positive again, Councillor Lawrence. I just wanted to make a quick point about the locums. The locums is not, you know, we're getting to grips with it here. It's not a new thing. It's not a new thing, the locums. The locums, it's been an issue for quite a long time under the previous administration. This new administration has recognised the cost, recognised how much is being spent, and also wants to have new people trained and kept in Medway. So I think, just for a point of clarity there, again, Councillor Lawrence, when you've said the leader has said it's all been resolved and got rid of, no, it can't be done that quickly, but it's being looked at swiftly to be dealt with. We want to have our own talent here in Medway, and we don't want to just be getting rid of people because they want to work at home or because they don't want to come into the office. And we also want to keep our teams here, Chair, in Medway, rather than sourcing it out to other places around the country, Councillor Lawrence. I think we want people locally to work here. I think that's what we would all agree.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Yeah, Councillor McDonald, of course we want people to work. We want Medway people to have Medway jobs, to be able to buy Medway homes, because that money then goes back into the economy. I was just picking up on the point that your leader did say he'd resolved and he'd made loads of savings. We'll always argue about the semantics. That's what he did say. I think the point about if we can't find the staff, then we have to be entrepreneurial and do other things. So that could be making sure that we've got good connections with legal colleges and universities, offering good, well-paid jobs to new lawyers who can do a lot of this work. So, what I'm hearing is, at the moment, is we're on the hamster wheel of doing the same thing we've done year in, year out. When do we get off the hamster wheel and maybe try something different? So MedPay might be different and it might have an impact, but ultimately, if people can go elsewhere for more money in a London waiting, and it's the same in teaching, you know, the local schools are struggling to recruit teachers against other places. So it's not a specific problem just to the Medway Council.
Sam, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think just to give some assurance that we do have a really good early entry programme into Medway. So, you know, that early talent identification is really strong, and we do work with the universities locally, particularly, for example, in planning. We have a programme that we do. We have an amazing apprenticeship academy, which, you know, appreciate not last year, the year before, we won the top 100 awards as a national employer. So, you know, within our strategy around our workforce design, that early entry, retaining our talent and growing our talent is really, really key. And I wouldn't say we're on a hamster wheel with that. I think, you know, it is the retention piece now around that, keeping them here. And that's where the Medpay review and the career progression is the answer to make sure people can stay with us and are rewarded for the things they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Councillor Croser.
Thank you, Chair. Just around about the statement about the leader saying that he got rid of all the locums. The bit that I heard was he got rid of the locums that were to do with HIF. He got rid of that section of locums. I don't think he was referring to locums across the board, or am I missing something?
Phil, would you like to respond?
If I'm honest, I can't recall the exact wording of what he said, and so I'm not going to either attempt to defend or refute what he said, quite honestly. I mean, I think there is a commitment by the new administration to reduce our reliance on locums, and part of the plan to do that, Sam alluded earlier, is us correcting pay, and the plan to do that, obviously within the constraints of a budget setting, is through a correction via a review of Medpay and benchmarking against market, and also a commitment to more realistic and meaningful pay awards going forward. That's my reading of what was said, but I can't remember exactly the words that he used.
Yeah, you like to come back?
I'm not sure whether it was said. It was actually, I think it was actually written.
Okay.
So, and it was around the HIF, but I don't know whether there's another scenario or another, you know, he didn't say it in another statement somewhere, I don't know.
Well, in terms of the HIF, any interims and consultancy staff that were employed on that project have been given their cards, basically.
Thank you, Phil. Councillor MacDonald.
It's only a quick one, Chair, because we don't really want to go on about this one, really, do we? But I think Councillor Crozier is quite correct. You know, like I said originally, right at the very thing, and maybe we need to go back on recordings and stuff if people are interested when they go home. The administration and the leader said that there was an issue and it needs to get to grips with it with the locums. The only thing I would say, just going back, Chair, on that other point, Councillor Lawrence, what you were saying about, if you look back on the comments you've made this evening, you did say providing a service even if it wasn't in Medway. So, you know, we need to be careful what you say at committee, because it can be, well, you know, like you're saying, you've gone and turned the leader's comments into something a bit different. Your comments about having people work for the council, they may not be in Medway, could be, I'm not saying they were, could be presumed as you saying that there should be outside sources like in ICT, elsewhere, but not in Medway. So you did correct, you don't need to come, you did correct it when you said about your local talent, but I just want to say maybe you're hearing something different about what the leader said at that meeting.
Chair, I think I've got to answer that. I mean, because I know you guys are going to splice together a nice video like you did from children's and young people, catching one of our councillors out. So, you know, at the end of the day, we have to provide the service at the best possible cost. I know officers are doing their utmost to do that, and, you know, there may well be a hybrid version out there at some point, but ultimately we need to provide the service at the best cost. I'm hoping that we can provide those jobs to Medway people so that they can spend that money in Medway. Of course I'm supporting that, but equally we have to look a little bit, otherwise we're just looking at one solution and there might be other solutions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I don't have another member. Just a quick one from me, Phil. What are we doing to ensure that income and expenditure remains within the budget approved by council?
Before the round one monitoring came to Cabinet and on to ONS, it will have been discussed at directorate management teams and at corporate management team, and the chief executive has instructed us all to identify management action to try and bring expenditure down or generate additional income. And in advance of the round two monitoring, that's exactly what directorate management team should be doing. So we'll see what the result of that is when the round two monitoring comes out. I think all I can say to you at this stage.
Thank you. Over to you, Vice Chair.
The committee is asked to note the results of the first round of the revenue budget monitoring for 2023-24. Point 1.2, the committee is asked to note that the Cabinet approved the virement of £500,000 from the independent fostering agency budget to the internal fostering budget to reflect the increased internal fostering rates. Point 1.3, the committee is asked to note that Cabinet instructed the corporate management team to implement urgent actions to bring expenditure back within the budget agreed by full council. Also notes a recommendation for a report back about locums and their cost.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Councillor MacDonald. Is that agreed? Great. Okay, that brings us to agenda item 9, which is the cost of living crisis response plan. Gemma Keeley, head of benefits and financial welfare, to introduce the report.
Sorry, I'll introduce it.
Sorry, point of correction. Phil Watts, our Chief Operational Officer, will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, just to correct, Gemma's here because a large part of that plan is delivered by her service, and I thought if we get any tough questions, I'm going to need some help. But I am going to introduce this, and I'm going to introduce this in a fairly quick and succinct way. When following the election and the formation of a new administration, the leader asked me fairly shortly after that to assist the new administration in formulating a cost of living plan to respond to the cost of living crisis as it's affecting people in Medway. Now, there's a lot that the council already does and some things that we intend to do as well, and they sit across a range of service areas. Now, Gemma's service is a big part of that in terms of the benefits and financial welfare, but there's stuff that happens in public health, within the education department. So, whilst my name sits at the top of this report, I'm the guy that kind of pulled it together, and our comms folk are the folk that then polished it and made it look like a meaningful plan that was fit for public consumption. And what you've got in front of you is the product of that collective work from a number of officers across the council. I think that's all I really want to say by way of introduction, but we'll try and answer any questions that you might have.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's quite important that while we're scrutinising the Cabinet, we balance our comments, and in this particular case, I would like to praise the Cabinet's achievements during its first 100 days, which I believe is up tomorrow. But we've done two things which have been reported at this committee and a number of others which have been reported elsewhere. Removing political appointments from local authority trading companies, and this report here on the cost of living, which was produced very quickly after we became, the Labour and Co-op group became the administration. The balance I would make in my comments is it's quite important to ensure that we're not doing this alone. It's a big issue which involves a lot of organisations and third sector bodies out there, and the officer is quite correct to refer to the fact that it's a joint effort across the council, and of course it must be a joint effort with outside bodies. I remember early on in Medway, when I was on the council between 1997 and 2000, we did a benefits take-up campaign, which had the effect, of course, one of its effects was, as outlined in the report, to increase income and purchasing power in the Medway area. And I think it's quite important we work with government departments, with the DWP, with the voluntary sector, as said, and churches to tackle this very serious crisis that we've got throughout the country, but to tackle it in Medway. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Prenter.
Yeah, I'm just following on from Councillor Jones, just to say I welcome the report. I'm pleased to see, as Phil said, that it highlights the services that were already offered and that people will be able to hopefully access them and be aware of them. So I think it's a positive thing.
Thank you. Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, the report is the report. I mean, there's nothing more to say other than who chose the branding of the PowerPoint that was done, because it doesn't strike me as council branding, and maybe it was an inadvertent error that it went out in Labour Party colours, but I'm sure that was an error. I was more interested in what we've done since the mid-July, so it's 6 weeks almost. Is the app being downloaded? Has anyone accessed the additional £211,000 that was in the report, which was actually not new money, it was just money from that people might not be aware that they could actually gain access to. So I was more interested in what's happened since, because some time has passed, and if we haven't actually got the app out there and people can't access it, when do we think they might be able to access it? Thank you.
Phil or Gemma.
Thank you, Chair. So when you say app, do you mean the lift tracker?
Sorry, there was an app that people could download, which was the 40 grand spend, wasn't it?
No, that the £40,000 spend was the low-income family tracker, which we purchased from Policy and Practice. So we're currently just finished. That's not an app. That's for the council to use. It takes the council data. It's a tool that we have and that we will use to be able to target areas of deprivation. We will be able to use data to be able to identify people who are at risk of homelessness, who are struggling with arrears, and people that we can go and help, because a lot of people aren't approaching us for whatever reason. You know, they are going to third sector. It'll enable us to be proactive. That's what this tool will do. So it's something that we're going to be used in. It's going to be used internally. We are literally, the DPIA has been agreed. We're just signing off the final bits of procurement, and we've already started working on the plans. Next week we have a strategic financial welfare working group starting up with service managers across the council, who are all going to come together, and we're going to work out how best we can use this tool for everyone, you know, not just for my service, but for housing, public health, everyone like that. Does that help?
Thank you.
Thank you thank you for the clarification. Sorry. Thank you for the clarification. But in terms of how do residents, so we're going to have a tool that's going to identify areas of deprivation. Well, I think we know where the deprivation is in the borough. So I'm just wondering how's that going to be used to then spend this additional money that was identified in the report. I think it's 211,000.
Yes.
So this is money that's not being drawn down by people who might be entitled to it.
Yes, so what this will do is it will take the data and it will actually enable us to identify individual people and actually go to individual people and do take-up campaigns. So the 210 is based on a pension credit take-up. So informing people that they could be entitled to pension credit, getting pensioners to claim for the pension credit, but we're also going to tie it in with a council tax reduction take-up campaign as well, so that we're making sure that people are getting all of the help that the council can give. So that tool actually gives us individual data. It's not just a wider, you know, we know that there's areas of deprivation in certain parts of Medway. It's actually person-specific, you know, people in threat of arrears, things like that. So it enables my team to actually go out and not target people, but target people, you know, go out and say, this is what we can do, this is how we can help you, rather than just opening the doors and saying, come to us, we can go and engage.
Chair, thank you for that. That's great. Maybe at the next time we could have a very short report on the impact of that piece of work, because I think it's important where, you know, we do want to reach people who might not be easy to reach, and, you know, seeing how that money's being spent and what impact we've had would be really interesting.
Yeah, of course. I bring a welfare report to the next ONS in October. So yeah, so I think that might be too soon to show anything meaningful. But I can give an update in that, and then we can schedule something else.
Would you like to come back?
No, that's perfect. It's just the branding was my only other question on the report. Who chose the branding? Which one of you?
Councillor MacDonald.
Chair, I've got to say, don't worry, Gemma, I will come on some positives in a moment. I've just got to get rid of the pettiness first here. This is a real important, Chair. This is a real important document, and thanks, Phil, for pulling it together. We don't need to be talking about the branding, Councillor. You know, I mean, if you really want to, we were fair. You know, whoever done it, I've got the 3 colours in there somewhere. So let's not worry about the branding. Let's worry about what's actually in the report, because the cost of living situation, the crisis, is bad. And, you know, people talk about, we know where there's deprivation. No, you don't. There is hidden deprivation in every ward in Medway. There's deprivation pockets in Hempstead. There's deprivation pockets in Rainham, as Councillor Kemp knows. There's deprivation pockets everywhere. And over in the peninsula in Hoo for sure, right? So I don't want us to undermine this document. We can make the little political comments, but I don't think we should do that when there's actually people really struggling behind this paper. And I know I've been lucky, Chair. I've been lucky. I've worked with Gemma in other guises and still continues to do so. And what I do want to say is a bit of positivity about your team. The team are amazing. Anyone that wants to find out what the team really do should either go and visit them, sorry, Gemma, or actually have a chat, because you'll see just a little bit near is nothing compared to what Gemma and the volunteer sector do, because they all work together in different areas doing some great bits of work. And that's what we all want, don't we, as councillors? We want people to be helped by all different, whether it's a church group, whether it's a charity, whether it's a housing association, etc. This is a good start. You know, the work is already going on, but this is a good start to actually embed this within our policies over the next 4 years at least, because we need something to scrutinise and something to go back on, don't we, to actually make sure people are being helped. So I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to end with that. Let's not worry about the PowerPoint. Please no one answer about what PowerPoint anyone picked or what colours, because that's not the issue here today. The issue is making sure Gemma and her team and others do the best we can for our residents going forward, because it's still going to be a struggle over this next year. It's not going to get any easier. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm actually going to support what Councillor MacDonald said. The actual report in itself, what you and your team's done and highlighted, very amazing. And it is not just looking at all the negative points. On page 78, you've got job vacancies remain high in Medway. That is really good to point that out as well. And myself and Councillor Howcroft-Scott both have primary age children, and we're probably at an income level where you would expect that we'd find it quite easy to deal with costs. That is not the case. There is a lot of people that are in that bracket above the low income that, with the cost of living crisis, are struggling. And we gave some pointers to each other to just try and help reduce costs. I've been looking at it with costs ranging from anything from £14 a day for my 10-year-old son to £60 a day. It is extortionate in cost trying to find that money. With regards to the report, yes, it's really, really good for the visible what we can see of the cost of living crisis and the impact having. Being a school governor, one of the big things we've got at our school is that there's still a lot of parents that are potentially eligible for pupil premium and the free school meals, that the stigma that they associate with it is still there, and they don't want to admit they need that help. And I just wondered, with us looking at all of this, what are we doing across Medway to try and identify them people, because they're the ones that are going to struggle to manage their debt, and they're going to get because of, and the thing is that it could be any type of person. Is the pride is if you're admitting that you need help, you're a failure as a person. but this cost of living crisis doesn't care. My fuel bills, what I was paying 2 years ago to what I'm paying now, it's 3 to 4 times the amount, and that's been hit across the board. The cost of just trying to get people into the childcare and things like that it's ballooning, and the availability is making costs go up. Food costs. I started shopping in Aldi 2 or 3 years ago to try and save money. My food bill's more than doubled, and we're not getting anything more. We're just getting the essentials. But I just wanted to see what are we doing to get the people, the forgotten people, not the visible people, the people that are potentially teetering, and to making sure that we're giving them the support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. Phil, would you like to respond?
I would like to say a few things. I think Gemma wants to come in as well. So I absolutely agree with you in terms of how widely this impact is being felt now. And, you know, I think it's being felt amongst people that work in my team and work in this organisation. And that's, you know, the council offers good jobs, and people that are in those jobs are still struggling as a result of the cost of living crisis. So I absolutely recognise what you said there. In terms of trying to encourage people that are eligible for help to come forward, that's partly what this plan is about. It's about putting all that support in one place, and pushing it out there so that people do step forward and access it. In terms of free school meals, I know that the Education Department has for many years been trying to encourage take up of free school meals, or at least, you know, putting your hand up and flagging your eligibility, so that we can make sure that people are getting the support they're getting, and that push will continue. I mean, it might be a question that needs to be asked at a CYP committee. That's not me pushing it, you know, sloping shoulders around it, but you might get a more detailed response from folk in the Education Department about exactly what they're doing to ensure that the parents are aware of their rights and are taking them up. But yeah, no, I agree with the things you said. Gemma, did you want to add anything?
I was just going to say the way we're going to get the hidden people is through the low income family tracker. That's how we're going to be able to identify those people. And I think free school meals can be identified through the data in that. So that is something we can take away. And I can speak to colleagues in education, because we do work together with for the Household Support Fund, free school meal vouchers for the holidays. So that is something we can take away and certainly look at. But yeah, the low-income family tracker is going to become a very important tool, I think, in our drive to identify people that are not presenting to us.
Thank you, Jimmy. Councillor Joy.
Yeah, I understand with the low-income tracker, would hopefully pick them up, but there's going to be people in that are above what's classified as low income, that because of what's been happening with the cost of living, just hammering everybody, that yes, their earning incomes may put them in a bracket where they're just not an issue, but with their expenditures going through the roof, their available spending power is potentially going to be in a negative, and obviously they're not going to get picked up in the current government criteria of who fits into low income.
Gemma, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. I think, yeah, I agree with you. I think that's, you know, that's quite apparent. I mean, with our household support fund that we've got, it's literally done on an income versus expenditure basis, so it's a reasonable, obviously, expenditure. If someone comes and they're spending thousands on holidays and that's why they haven't got any money, then obviously we don't help. But where we can see from people's bank statements that there is that real thin line, we can help with food, we can help with fuel, we can directly help to energy companies now, we can help with water, school uniform, white goods, beds, all sorts of things. And that's one thing that we're really trying to push is the household support fund, because we've got money sitting there, and there are some changes going to Cabinet on Tuesday to try and make it more accessible to people, following on from the cost of living strategy, to make it more accessible and to make it easier for people to claim. But that is there, and you know, that doesn't preclude anyone in Medway from applying, because anyone can apply as long as they can demonstrate the need within the eligibility.
Yes, Councillor Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Gemma, I think from getting that information back, that's must be a welcome information to all residents of Medway. I didn't actually realise we did that income against expenditure, and yes, if people have been able to afford loads and loads of holidays, they shouldn't be helped, but there's a lot of people that are just struggling in general, so that is really, really good news to hear that. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to you, Councillor Brown, Chairman, just a quick one. Reference made to Refer Kent. Can you elaborate on what it is and how does it benefit Medway's resident and how is it funded?
Yeah, of course. So it's being funded through the Household Support Fund. So Refer Kent is actually already established within KCC. So it's a KCC system. They work with a company called ReferNet. And KCC are set up, and it is essentially a way to be able to send referrals between the council, third sector, between third sector organisations. Obviously, there's a lot of data protection around it, and we've undergone DPIAs, etc. But essentially, what it does is, if someone approaches Medway Council and says, "I'm having a problem with gambling," we can refer them to a specialist gambling organisation. If someone says, "I'm having issues with loan sharks," there's a loan sharks one on there. And a part of the Refer Kent setup will be actually to get Medway's third sector partners on there. So Medway Council will be on there as a referral organisation, and also, you know, our third sector partners, you know, CAB, MVA, all of the people in our food partnerships. We're going to be inviting everyone to join up, and it will be that free exchange of information, obviously guarded by data protection, but you know, if people want to make the referral, it can go over. And we were actually, ever since the pandemic, we've been working with KCC, just sharing information, sharing intelligence, joint practices, and just working together. And KCC actually approached us and offered to join up with them, and yeah, it was deemed to be a good idea. So that's what we've done, and we think it really serves a purpose, because you know, it's something that's missing, that connection between the council, the third sector, and then in between the third sector as well. So it's going to really help. Does that help?
Brilliant. Thank you.
No problem.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Like everybody else, I'm really welcome this this report. And Gemma, I'm really happy that you're going to look for the hidden poor. We're all only too bad things happen to us to become homeless. You lose your mental health and you lose your income. You're on the streets. The thing we need to do collectively, and I think this report might start to do it, is actually to tell people it's all right to ask for help. It's all right to signpost people to help. But what we really need to do is to stop demonising people who find themselves in a situation where they need some temporary help. And I agree with Councillor Joy. It's actually the people standing in front of us, the people who nurse us, and the people who care for us. These are the working poor. And that kind of demonisation that has been going on for the last few years has been shocking, but hopefully we've turned a corner on that. And I welcome what you're saying, Gemma, actually to go down to the individual. We do have, and I'll agree with Councillor Lawrence, we do have some information on where we have pockets of deprivation, and we use it in public health across the wards. But that's not any use. If you happen to be living in a detached bungalow in one of our affluent areas, and you have actually no food, I know people who this has happened to. They have a house which they can't afford to run, but they have this pride And this thing, the stigma, which you mentioned, Councillor Joy, that people are held back by. And I think what we have to do is say, this is a safe subject. We collectively need to stop demonising the poor, to recognise it could be any of us any day, and to assist people and say, it's all right to ask help. Now we need to get a media campaign going, and I suspect that Gemma, you're probably leading the fight on that one, to get out there and start to do the kind of work you just did for Councillor Joy tonight, who didn't know that there was something available. Councillor Joy, you're not the only one. There's about 250,000 people in Medway probably don't know that. And I thank everybody for this. I welcome it, and I know that loads of us are working along with people and the third sector to really try and lift this from the shadows and bring it into the light.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I don't have any other member, so over to you, Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. This committee is asked to note the Cost of Living Crisis Response Plan 2023-24 for Medway as set out in Appendix 1.
Yep, seconded.
Sorry, that brings us to agenda item 10, which is the work program. Terry Reynolds to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I wanted to raise your attention to, just from a recommendation that you've made earlier today, is you have got your report on reducing the use of non-permanent staff at your next meeting, so we'll probably be able to weave those up, hopefully with Sam, and get all that covered off in the next meeting. And then I just wanted to update everybody in relation to the section on task groups. So the Regeneration, Culture and Environment ONS Committee have met, and they have come up with 2 topics, one of which is public transport and active travel, the other being new social housing regime. The Health and Adult Social Care Committee have come up with the impact of air quality on health, and the Children and Young People ONS Committee didn't make a decision at their meeting. They want to deal with it via the Chair, Vice Chair and Opposition spoke at their meeting. So Steve Dickens, who obviously looks after this committee normally, will in due course be making arrangements for all of the ONS chairpersons to meet and do their discussions to look at the topics, but your decision tonight is to decide whether you want to come up with any topics. You've obviously got some set out in the report, but I don't know if any of you have got any suggestions you want to add. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any member? Over to the Vice Chair.
This committee is asked to agree the work programme at Appendix 1 to the report. The committee is asked to note the work programmes of the other overview and scrutiny committees at Appendix 2. The committee is asked to identify up to 2 potential task group topics for consideration at a meeting of the overview and scrutiny committee chairpersons, vice chairpersons and opposition spokespersons.
Is that seconded?
Yeah.
Councillor McGovern.
Yes, seconded.
Is it agreed?
Sorry, so just so I'm clear, so what 2 topics is it that you're identifying? Because there are 3 in the report, and I mean, I don't know if you want to go forward with any of those, if you don't want to offer anything up at this point, just so I'm clear. So in terms of the decision, obviously you've got cost of living support in the report in front of you at 6.5. You've got the cost of living support, you've got climate change and Medway 2.0, which is the digital programme. Climate change, obviously there is a member working group on that, so you may lean towards the other 2. I don't want to put ideas in your heads, but that's an option. Just so I'm clear in terms of what the committee is recommending in terms of identifying those topics.
Any member? Councillor MacDonald.
Chair, can I just maybe suggest for us not to recommend anything at this point, because if the chairs and vice chairs and even children's haven't decided yet, then maybe it might be better at that meeting, or is that what you said, Terry?
It is. So the purpose of the meeting that will go forward, so because business support has the kind of you are the gods when it comes to overview and scrutiny. So what you're supposed to do at that point is take forward 4 topics from the mix. So you have your own topic, a health and adult social care one, a CYP one, and a regen one. And you'll have 4 topics, and then you'll rank them in what one is considered first. And so you will decide as a committee what order they go in and everything else. So you may be happy to not come up with anything at this point and wait for that discussion. But you're here as a committee supposed to put forward some suggestions to put into that mix. That's the purpose of today.
My only issue would have been, obviously, as in the health ONS chair, I'll be pushing air quality, obviously, because that's what we agreed. So I didn't want to influence that, even though I think it'd be a very good thing to do. But
and very cross-cutting.
Well, the reason I can say, Chair, the reason we spoke with Public Health, the reason we decided on the air quality is that we don't have any proper stats about air quality across Medway. That's one of the stats that we know that impacts everybody, and that it would be a really good focus group, because you could look at air quality with health, regeneration, housing, etc., even climate change. We could look at it. That was the reason that we thought it'd be a very good cross-cutting focus group rather than having loads of them. We thought it'd be a really good task group to put forward. So that's still on the table for me is the air quality, because we haven't got no proper stats.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence.
Chair, I'm personally interested in Medway 2.0, only because I think digitisation can be really transformative, especially at frontline. And, if we're talking about how people access services, I think the digitisation programme, I think our Medway Council website leaves a lot to be desired in some areas. And, when I attended the marketplace talking to the IT team, I got the feeling that the digitisation has been going on a long time, and I'd be very interested to know what we've actually achieved for the money that's been spent, and what's the vision for the future, and how it can help solve some of the recruitment issues we've got. So I would be interested in seeing that one go forward.
Is that seconded?
Chair, so on the table then is air quality and Medway 2.0 at the moment. That's what we've got from members at the moment.
So we've got the air quality.
The air quality, I think, is really important, Dan. I think you're right. But what's the thing is, we're going to look at it, and what's the solution going to be potentially? Because for Rainham, for example, the solution is either you've got to build roads to take the traffic away from Rainham, for example. So I'm just wondering, if we all know what the problem, there is a problem with air quality, we know that. If we can't solve the problem, we'll come up with a solution other than banning cars, vans. Is there any point in doing something where we know what the answer already is?
I'm glad you asked that, because that was my challenge to James Williams from Public Health. And the issue is we don't know. We don't know the real data of our air quality. And the impact, not only on our housing, our roads, our children, health, the impact is massive. And I think, from funding purposes, from Department of Health, our hospitals, etc., if we haven't got the evidence of how bad the air quality is, but yet all of our stats around asthma, coronary heart disease and everything is really out there, what do we do? It's one of those things that we've never got to the bottom of, apart from one of the little air pollution things maybe on the street just to get a little bit of detail. We haven't actually got to the bottom of it.
Councillor Lawrence.
I totally agree, Dan. I think having the stats, having the data, Medway 2.0 could have a network of air quality monitorers. Okay, and then, in the next council, we could actually take 2 or 3 years of data, see how it changes. There are apps that you can look at air quality where you're sitting. Yeah. Okay, so there is data, but I think it's how we craft the solution, because there is always a danger. You raise expectation that you've got a solution, but actually the solution might involve £1 billion worth of spend, and I don't know whether we can actually deliver a solution to air quality at this junction.
Sorry, Chair, just one more. I think, just as a recommendation, I think the idea is, I suppose, is if you get it down, and Terry, help me, if you've got it down to a short list of task groups, then maybe people can speak to it of why they think that is the good, including the people that we want to speak to, i.e. James and others, to tell us why they think them certain ones are a really good idea. I'm just trying to put an idea out there because that's all we've got out there at the moment, isn't it?
That's exactly the point. So we get the ideas in, and then there'll be a bit more, not a huge analysis, but there'll be a bit more of analysis about why the topic's important, what the possible impacts could be, and then from full of more of that information, then as a committee you kind of decide what ones you're going to go ahead with, what ones you aren't, and how you're going to rank them in terms of what's the most important thing to look at first.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Joy.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor McDonough, I think with air quality, you're right. We only seem to measure when we get a bottleneck. But air quality to a number of areas, so schools is now becoming a major issue on air quality because people just don't know how to switch off a car engine when they're sitting for 45 minutes because they want to be the closest person to the school gates. And it's becoming a major issue because it's been brought up within our ward on a road that I didn't even know would be affected by a school. And yes, and I also agree that with what Councillor Lawrence said, the digitisation, and like I said, my 10-year-old boy can probably go through and find things a lot quicker than I can, and I thought I was good at it. I've got nothing on the younger generation. Literally, they can do it with a smart device things in seconds that will take me quite a few minutes, and it is something that we need to be looking forward because a lot of us are probably not going to be here in 20 years' time, so we've got to be planning.
Speak for yourself, Mark.
20 odd years plus, so but we've got to be looking at in the future. So the digitisation is the future, and we need to be embracing that more. So I think really both ideas are really good ideas, and I'd like to support both of them ideas. Thank you.
So I think we got consensus. Would you like to make a proposal? Yeah. Is that seconded? Okay. Back to you, Vice Chair. Sorry, Councillor Croser.
Thought you'd missed me there, Chair. Thank you. I heard us talk about public transport earlier on. Is that one of the options for a group?
Sorry, let me go back to my notes. That was a region one. So region has, yes, the region had proposed two topics, one of which was public transport and active travel.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you. Back to you, Vice Chair.
The committee is asked to agree the work programme at Appendix 1 to the report. The committee is asked to note the work programmes of the other overview and scrutiny committees at Appendix 2. The committee is asked to identify 2 potential task group topics for consideration at a meeting of overview and scrutiny committee chairpersons, vice chairpersons and opposition spokespersons. These are air quality and Medway 2.0.
Is that seconded? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our second Business Support and Digital Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.